May 8th marks 80 years since people across Europe celebrated the Allied victory over Nazi Germany on Victory in Europe Day. And while the fighting would continue in the Pacific until August, for the British and Europeans, 6 long years of war were coming to an end. The story of some remarkable American women who helped make that victory happen is the subject of a new book. Elizabeth Palmer gives us a closer look.
Upon the men and women who are defending their island kingdom.
They weren't soldiers, but they were determined to join the fight, so they took to the skies over Britain.
The American military would not take women pilots. So they heard about the program in England that would take women and foreigners and signed on.
Becky Aikman has written about them in a new book called Spitfires.
They all loved to fly. They loved the freedom of flying, and they wanted to fly in the war.
They came from all walks of life. Ann Wood, from a wealthy family, was a college grad and flight instructor. Jacqueline Cochran once worked for Saks Fifth Avenue. She had a commercial pilot's license. Hazel Jane Rains and Mary Webb Nicholson were both stunt pilots, while Roberta Sandoz flew crop dusters. In all, 27 American women signed on with the British Air Transport Auxiliary, civilians supporting the military. Richard Pode founded the ATA Museum near London.
ATA stood for anything to anywhere. And literally, at the beginning of each day, a pilot had no idea what they were going to do.
When you get there, don't forget to send your signals.
Their job was to ferry planes from A to B.
These big babies, Mr. Hitler, are Halifax bombers.
New ones fresh from the factory to air bases, and broken ones back to be repaired. All kinds of aircraft, from training planes to fighters.
Everybody's dream was a Spitfire. And one of the ladies said to me, "You didn't even need to breathe on it. All you had to do was think about it." And somebody else said, "The Spitfire was poetry made flight." I like that.
Love it.
I like that.
Bombers and fighters in the hands of the ATA.
And so they were very skilled delivery people.
Absolutely. They didn't have to fight in the sky. What they were doing was enabling the RAF to fight in the sky.
It was demanding and uncomfortable.
Some of them were open cockpit aeroplanes.
It's unimaginable.
Yeah, it gets very cold up there.
Although they weren't facing the Germans, they were facing an enemy, and that enemy was the British weather.
The British weather was very changeable. There could be sudden clouds and storms, and ATA pilots flew without instruments or radios. So it was extremely dangerous to get caught in zero visibility suddenly, no way of knowing where you were.
And there was the constant risk of mechanical failure. Lauren Scott is the niece of Mary Nicholson Webb, the first woman ever to get a pilot's license in North Carolina.
Clear on the left, clear on the right. She taught my father how to fly. She was so scared to watch him solo that the story is she ran behind the hangar because she just couldn't watch.
Nicholson was the only American woman in the ATA to die in service. Forced by heavy cloud to make an emergency landing, she crashed into a barn. Nicholson is a heroine.
All right, here we go.
And trailblazer for generations of Nicholsons who have followed her into the cockpit.
How has she inspired you?
Oh, I don't even know if I can put it into words. And rotate. She, furthermore, broke so many societal norms and cultural norms for the time for being a woman. She was decades ahead of her time, and so I just have so much respect for her, chasing after her dreams.
The American women were both gutsy and glamorous. In their posh, tailored uniforms, they became the darlings of English society, after some initial skepticism.
There was a sense that maybe they weren't serious, they were there to have a good time, they would pack up and go home as soon as the work got hard.
They proved themselves, though, pretty quickly.
They did. They were really solid pilots.
And in charting a brave course for themselves, became legends and role models.
Short final, runway 27, Boulder, full stop.
The sky represented everything they wanted. It represented freedom, it represented challenge, It represented respect. Every single one of them said it was the highlight of her life.
For CBS Saturday Morning, I'm Elizabeth Palmer in London.
Brava, Becky Aikman, for writing that book, celebrating history that was either forgotten or
just wasn't told or nobody wanted to tell it. Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm reading a book right now, A Woman of No Importance, which is also about an American woman and her role in World War II. And I love that we are hearing these stories, American or not, it doesn't matter, but of the women and the work they were able to do because they were overlooked sometimes, because there was no one else to do it.
And they pierced the veil. They just were relentless about achieving.
Great stories.
And contributing.
Yes, and never too late to remind us of that.
That's for sure. Thank you, Dana. Mexico City is home to 22 million residents, one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world with a mix of modern urban life and ancient history. It was built on a large lake system evident in the district of Xochimilco, a network of canals dating back to the Aztecs. Today, the UNESCO World Heritage Site is a tourist attraction that brings the past to life.
In one of the oldest capitals in the Americas, a city built atop ancient ruins, food, art, and culture reign supreme, drawing 45 million tourists each year. But along Mexico City's southern edge, beyond the vibrant Embarcadero, there's a more natural sight to see, the ancient canals of Xochimilco.
Fue muy importante desde el punto de vista agrícola.
As historian Araceli Peralta put it, what should be the main attraction.
El principal atractivo para el turismo nacional.
The best way to see the region's archaeology and cultural traditions, she says, is aboard one of these, the colorfully carved trajinera.
Xochimilco tiene una gran riqueza cultural.
This entire valley, she says, is a marvel of Xochimilcan engineering. The people that settled here more than a millennia ago dug these canals, creating raised gardens known as chinampas. Some are still in use today.
This is like a window to our pre-Hispanic past.
Hola!
We think of the chinamperos, the farmers, as the guardians of the place, no?
Like those at the Arca Tierra, an agricultural collective founded and run by Lucio Usubiaga.
We have a lot of medicinal herbs, no, and a lot of vegetables.
And they would plant side by side?
Yes, it's the contrary to industrial agriculture, no, the monocultures. Our main goal is to highlight peasant agriculture in terms of the cultural heritage they have here in Xochimilco.
So I'm a little lost in translation. So peasant in American English has a very negative connotation. It must not have the same connotation here.
I say it on purpose because peasant, in our opinion, in Arca, is the most valuable profession right now because they take care of our environment and they produce good food.
What were you doing before?
I was studying philosophy. Yeah.
During the time of the Aztecs, these farms fed tens of thousands. But within the last century, the system fell victim to urban sprawl.
Lechuga.
Farmers like Veronica Martinez Guevara are investing in its comeback.
Here you have cauliflower next to lettuces, next to beets.
For the last 15 years, Arca Tierra has trained 70 farmers to carry on the chinampa tradition. Martinez Guevara's grandfather had owned a chinampa, but couldn't afford to maintain the land.
Do you feel as though you're reclaiming a part of your heritage?
I feel very joyful that I get to do what my ancestors, my grandparents did, she says, and I'm happy to be back.
The chinampas would recover like that if only a very small percentage of Mexico City would say, I want the produce from there. The farmers would have jobs, would be very well paid, and we would no longer have the urban sprawl growing on top of the chinampas.
I'm looking for beets that are ready for harvest. You have to have the perfect eye. Clearly, Lena knows how to pick a beet.
Already, 40 restaurants in Mexico City source produce from here.
Oh, that's beautiful. Look at that. So
I dig this. Critical demand to feed a wider farm-to-table movement.
She uses her fingers. I need this. 17,000 plants you plant every month. Sister girl, gotta give it to you guys. I'm serious.
Beyond the Chinampas and further downstream.
Hola, bienvenidos al ajolotario.
Locals like Victor de Valle, a sixth-generation fisherman here, hope to save something even more ancient, the ajolote, named for the Aztec god of fire and lightning.
Oh, wow, look at him.
Oh. His refuge houses 50 of the critically endangered species. Toys made in their likeness are currently the object of desire for both kids and adults alike.
Do you know how popular the ajolote are in the United States?
Mm-hmm. Native solely to this area, it's estimated that only a few hundred remain in the wild, prey to pollution and invasive species.
What does it mean to you to be able to preserve something that's so unique to this area, the area of your ancestors?
Bueno, pues yo en especial, precisamente por eso fue la...
Keeping the alien-like amphibian alive, he says, is a responsibility to generations coming behind him. A responsibility also felt by organizations like Arca Tierra, seeking to find balance between what once sustained this landscape and our modern needs.
Are you having an impact?
A small one, yes. With 300 families that receive our boxes, 40 restaurants, and all the farmers' network of 50 families, and all the jobs that they create. So it's a small impact, but what we're happy to say is that it is possible.
It was so hard to believe that that district was literally right outside of the city. I mean, literally, you are at the Embarcadero and then boom, you're in the middle of this canal system. And this farm-to-table movement is really hoping to latch on with many co-ops like Arca Tierra. But it's moving ahead like we're seeing here in the United States.
And it's helping each step of the way. It seems like it's helping somebody else.
Yeah,
and that's a beautiful thing.
People reclaiming their sense of pride in tradition.
Yeah, fantastic. New attention on a centuries-old tradition. For more than 1,000 years, Christian pilgrims and those seeking self-reflection have embarked on the Camino de Santiago. It's a network of hiking routes throughout France, Portugal, and Spain that all meet in the Spanish city of Santiago de Compostela. This year, Elizabeth Palmer went along for the journey to see how this ancient attraction is adapting in the 21st century.
It's early morning in the Herbuan Monastery in northern Spain. Next door in the hostel, Brianna Johnson is getting ready with ankle support and some fond farewells. Today is the final leg of a very personal journey. She's one of the modern pilgrims who, rain or shine, set out to follow an ancient way known simply as the Camino.
Basically every single person I've talked to has been interested in connecting in something greater and getting to know themselves better.
They seek those connections on a route marked with a scallop motif. It winds hundreds of miles across southern Europe, from the Atlantic coast to village roads and along forest paths, all leading to the great cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. It's the final stop for walkers who can scarcely believe they've made it, exhausted and ecstatic. For more than 1,000 years, Christians have trodden the same route on a holy journey to the shrine in Santiago's cathedral, which the faithful believe holds the bones of Jesus' disciple, St. James.
It's born out of Christianity. The Camino de Santiago started with the discovery of the remains of St. James here in Santiago de Compostela, right over in the cathedral.
Stephen Rindle is a former U.S. paratrooper who's walked the Camino almost every year for a decade. It's both an expression of his Christian faith and a calling. Rindle founded Warriors on the Way, pilgrimage as therapy for traumatized American veterans.
Every day begins with the Mass, so you get your healing theme for the day during that morning Mass, and then immediately upon finishing, we start hiking.
Religion, he says, can play a role in recovery or not.
When you're on the Camino and you've got these beautiful lush fields in front of you and the trees and waterways and then big open fields, it's nothing but positive reinforcement.
Hey, I'm Frank, New York.
It was Martin Sheen in the movie The Way back in 2010 that made the Camino famous in the U.S. Last year, a record 40,000 Americans made the journey. And they all came through here, the Pilgrim's Office in Santiago de Compostela. Travelers who complete at least 60 miles of the Camino on foot or 120 by bicycle check in here to get an official stamp. Cesar Rua has been welcoming them for 18 years. And he says the crowds have changed.
So every year there are more and more Americans.
Yeah, sure. It's exponential.
Exponential.
It's exponential, yes, every day.
The traditional inhabitants of Santiago have been forced to adjust. The town's deeply Catholic traditions have had to make way for guest houses, souvenir shops, and trendy restaurants. But still, in high season, Santiago is overwhelmed.
Like, do people worry?
We do, because the states that Santiago is right now, it's not capable of having so much people. You know, there are not enough hotels, there are not enough restaurants, but in a few years' time, it will be.
And a good thing, too, because these are boom times for walkers in search of exercise, spiritual renewal, and a link with history.
Do you feel the weight of the past as you go?
Yes.
So many thousands of people who've trodden these roads over more than 1,000 years.
I do, and I will say as an American, it's particularly fun because we're used to, like, if a building is more than 70 years old, we're like, wow, that's an old building.
For Johnson, who's between jobs, the Camino offered a break from her phone and social media.
I think something where you are forced to disconnect and just have a lot of time to think and connect with something a little bit larger than yourself.
What have you learned about yourself?
I've learned that I really can do hard things, that I push myself really hard. I mean, my average step count has been 40,000 steps a day.
And have you found some peace that you didn't have when you started?
Yes, I think so. I think just like kind of a more of an inner calm.
So why should this ancient path, more than any other hiking trail, bring inner calm? The tradition of hospitality, for a start, with simple accommodation offered cheaply by the church and by local people. But it's also, says Steve, the pilgrim's mindset, seeking, not expecting.
In that you have to have a concept of relying on others. The pilgrim has, as unique from a tourist, for example, the need to go in and find what's available in the hospitality, find what's available in the way of help.
In the drizzle of late afternoon, a weary Brianna Johnson finally arrives at the cathedral. By the time we catch up with her, it's sinking in.
Yeah, this is awesome. Wow, this is surprising.
Those are tears of joy?
Yes, totally. Yeah, definitely not sadness.
She has covered 160 grueling miles in 11 days.
Well done, you.
I mean, I was thinking this has to be the biggest feat I've accomplished.
The next feat will be to carry some of that Camino magic back with her into the bustle of modern life. For CBS Saturday Morning, Elizabeth Palmer from Spain.
160 miles with what? 20 pounds at least on her back.
But it is the thing she said, I can do hard things. In that time later in life where you're like, I don't know if I can keep going. I don't know if I can get back up after getting knocked down. That's what you reflect on. It's beautiful, and what a message it gives you to leave with.
And it's something I think backpackers, they are truly the in-between the tourist and the pilgrim.
Yeah.
In that seeking of something special.
Interesting how the town also has had to adapt to all of the new attention.
Manhattan's Morgan Library and Museum hosts a treasure trove of artifacts from across the globe. Once the private domain of the J.P. Morgan banking dynasty, it's currently celebrating its centennial as a public institution, and is paying homage to the librarian entrusted to run it for nearly half a century, all while she held on to a secret she feared could bring an end to her career.
Belle DeCosta Green was here from a very early time in her career and in Morgan's collecting career, and really shaped what this institution is today. So yes, the Morgan is not itself without her story.
She can't be erased.
Oh, no.
120 years ago, Belle DeCosta Green was hired to organize the personal library of famed financier John Pierpont Morgan, as in J.P. Morgan, and later his son Jack. Both entrusted her to accumulate and catalog one of the world's most valuable collections of books and art for what was then known as the Pierpont Morgan Library, a vocation she was fully committed to for more than 40 years.
She was the librarian that made sure that everyone loved the materials that she was showing.
There was even a French manuscript that apparently anytime she would take it off the shelf, she would kiss it before giving it to a researcher, and then would do the same thing as she reshelved it. So I think she showed these books a lot of reverence and love, of course.
Now the Morgan is showing that reverence to their inaugural director in a new exhibit, Belle DeCosta Green, A Librarian's Legacy.
Here we are.
And this is Belle.
Yep.
Erica Chilella and Philip Palmer are the co-curators.
She loved to buy rough drafts of literary manuscripts. This is one example, a French manuscript by Honoré de Balzac, one of her great acquisitions. And we have a few more down here.
A mix of modern and medieval materials.
These are books printed by the first English printer, William Caxton. You can see a newspaper article here showing Belle Green in the auction room saying
$50,000.
Exactly. And this same year, she gets a raise to $10,000 a year, which is almost $300,000 today, and becomes really quite a celebrity in the papers.
Celebrity that also afforded her access and respect not often given to independent, unmarried women of her time.
She was the kind of person who knew everybody, right? You know those people? They know everybody.
Heidi Artizone wrote her biography, An Illuminated Life.
How would you characterize her?
Belle DeCosta Green could be a lot of different things. She could be gruff, she could be charming, she could be manly, she could be feminine, she could be silly, she could be dead serious. She was an extraordinarily complicated personality.
Perhaps because she was hiding a secret.
She lied about almost everything for, it turns out, some very good reasons.
J.P. Morgan biographer Jean Strauss became fascinated by the woman known as the soul of the Morgan Library and set out to uncover her real story. Not an easy task. Green destroyed nearly all of her personal papers, but there were rumors based on her appearance.
I followed the clues that she left about herself. I went to Washington, where she was born. I got her birth certificate, and the options on a birth certificate were, at that point, were W for white, C for colored. Her birth certificate says colored.
Born Belle Marion Greener, the woman who had long claimed to be Portuguese, was not only African American, but the daughter of trailblazer Richard Theodore Greener.
They were both listed in the Dictionary of American Biography, but with no cross-referencing saying that they were connected to each other.
Greener was a pioneering force during Reconstruction, Harvard's first Black graduate, a key diplomat in Russia, and the first Black professor at the University of South Carolina. But in a society where skin color determined access to opportunity, passing for white became a familiar escape. One Belle's mother, Genevieve Fleet, believed was the best choice for her family's future. That meant eventually severing all family connections when they moved north and splitting from her activist husband.
It remains the family church, the homestead, if you will.
We met some of the Fleet family descendants at Mount Zion Church in Georgetown, an African-American congregation co-founded by Belle Greene's maternal grandfather.
James H. Fleet was one of the founding members of this church. It was part of the Underground Railroad. So this would have been just the center of the community, of the Black Georgetown community.
Audrey, Simeon, and Jessica Cabnis knew little of their famous cousin before the exhibit.
It's just magnificent to behold and to think that this little woman, this little Black woman from Georgetown, brought this all together. It's just awe-inspiring.
Since, the family has spent months learning about Greene and her choice to pass.
Why do you think Belle embraced it?
She grew up like that. They would have already been in African-American high society in Georgetown, so she was already held to a certain standard. From a young age, they passed when they needed to, so it was really all she knew.
What is the greater takeaway of the story of Belle?
It's still unfolding. We've learned so much, but we're just still trying to put it all in perspective.
Perspective on a story that almost went untold.
We have a couple of acquisitions in the final case here. They're actually her final manuscript acquisitions. And one is a Frederick Douglass letter, and we also have an Ethiopian gospel book from the early 1400s. So what does it mean that she made these acquisitions of African-American history and African culture at the end of her career? I think there's some speculation, would these be acquisitions she might have made had she not had to hide her identity?
Belle DaCosta Greene was celebrated as many things in her lifetime. A scholar, a curator, a librarian. Now, 75 years after her death, she is finally being celebrated for the woman she really was.
Passing really is about defining who you are and having the right to define who you are.
This was a family of means, a family of historical connection, and they mattered. Yeah. They mattered in their community. And still, it wasn't enough.
That's what we really hope that people take away. Genevieve, Belle Greene's mother, really wanted the best for her children. She knew her children had the ability to be great. And as we see with Belle Greene's legacy, she was seen for how she wanted to be seen, for that full sense of self, regardless of race.
We see it over and over again, this choice that people often have to make because of the racial construct, that they couldn't possibly be as good in order to do whatever it was that they wanted to do.
She could not have been a colored woman doing this.
Yeah, and there's some who suspect that J.P. Morgan knew, but by the time that he may have known, she had just proven herself.
Right. Well, I thought when they said she was a woman who knew everyone, I'm like, that's you.
Oh, me.
That's you.
Well, the exhibit is still going until May 4th, so rush out and check it out.
January 2nd, 1942, Manila falls. Manila lasts 26 days. Japan's endless flow of invasion forces doomed Manila.
It is considered one of the worst defeats for the U.S. military. In the weeks after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Japan's blitz on Southeast Asia continued with the invasion of the Philippines. After a months-long siege, American forces surrendered. General Douglas MacArthur's American Supreme Military Commander in the Pacific evacuated to Australia and famously vowed to return. He left General Jonathan Wainwright to command American and Filipino forces in the face of overwhelming odds. Now the story of these two American heroes is the subject of a new book. David Martin sat down with the author of The Fate of the Generals.
American troops waged the final battle to liberate Manila from the Japanese. The conquering hero, General Douglas MacArthur, makes good on his famous vow, "I shall return," to the Philippines. But there was another hero of the Philippines, a general named Jonathan Wainwright, who made a different vow.
And that vow was that he would stay and share the fate of his men, even when it meant becoming the highest-ranking American prisoner of war of World War II.
Jonathan Horn tells the story in The Fate of the Generals, the first biography of Wainwright based on his personal diary.
We have part of Wainwright's diary here.
It survived 3 years in Japanese prison camps and came to rest at the Army's Heritage Center in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
So this is an incredible historical document.
And the very first page of this diary is the most important page because it really decides the rest of the story.
A story that begins in the opening months of World War II, with the Japanese closing in on his headquarters on the island of Corregidor in Manila Bay. Wainwright pledged that he
will, if necessary, surrender myself with my troops. No other course of action would be honorable.
Wainwright had been left in command after the larger-than-life MacArthur was ordered to escape from the Philippines to Australia.
MacArthur is not just a man, he's a symbol. He is America's most famous general, and he's seen as too important to become a prisoner.
MacArthur arrived in Australia to great fanfare while Wainwright was left to make a final stand against the Japanese on Corregidor.
How does it end on Corregidor?
There's going to be a massacre of 12,000 to 13,000 lives. And so he makes this choice that it's time to raise the white flag over Corregidor.
Does he literally raise a white flag?
There literally is. They take the American flag down and they raise a white flag over Corregidor.
Wainwright sent this final cable to President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
With broken heart and head bowed in sadness, but not in shame, I report to Your Excellency that I must arrange terms for the surrender of the fortified islands of Manila Bay.
Roosevelt responded with a message Wainwright copied word for word into his diary.
Personal from the President to Lieutenant General Wainwright.
We have been following with growing admiration the day-by-day accounts of your heroic stand. The American people ask no finer example of tenacity, resourcefulness, and steadfast courage.
Wainwright wasted away in Japanese prisons, at one point down to 125 pounds, not knowing if he was a hero for sticking with his troops or a disgrace for surrendering.
He is isolated from the outside world. He's not getting mail. It'll take 2 years before he receives a handwritten letter from his wife. And, I think that was the worst form of torture in some ways because it left him to wonder, what did people in the outside world think of him? And he begins to think the worst, that they are going to hate him for having made this decision for the sake of his men.
What's the state of his health?
He doesn't think he can survive much longer, but he makes this entry in his diary. And I think it's the most moving entry in his diary. I will make a fight for life as I fought against overwhelming odds in the Philippine Islands. No one called me yellow then, and by God, I won't be now.
When the war suddenly ended with the thunderclap of the atom bomb, Wainwright was reunited with his former commanding general, a moment which left them both virtually speechless.
Finally, MacArthur says, well, it's good to see you. And then Wainwright pauses and finally says, it's good to see you too.
MacArthur at a loss for words?
MacArthur at a loss for words. It doesn't happen very often, but it did happen here.
A better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past.
MacArthur regained the power of speech in time to accept the Japanese surrender aboard the battleship Missouri, with Wainwright standing at attention behind him.
To General Jonathan Wainwright goes the first bet.
Wainwright came home a hero. A motorcade across the Potomac and a speech at the Washington Monument.
There's one last stop he has to make, which is at the White House for a meeting with President Truman.
The president walked him out to meet reporters, and Wainwright thought he might have to give another speech.
But it's Harry Truman who will give a speech, and that speech is presenting Wainwright with the Medal of Honor. And Wainwright knows it as soon as he hears those, what he calls those magical words, above and beyond the call of duty.
For CBS Saturday Morning, David Martin in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Oh, a touching tribute to a man that many people, I would say, did not know about.
That's what I was just thinking. This is why I love some of the books out there, where you're able to discover something in a side that no one is aware of.
Absolutely. That's why we do what we do. SpaceX launched its Falcon 9 rocket yesterday. It might have felt routine. The private space agency has more than 150 missions planned this year, but before mankind could reach for the stars, we had to conquer the skies. Bradley Blackburn takes us to the place where that history was made. Bradley, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Michelle, good morning. Travelers who've come to New York probably know the names of the city's airports, LaGuardia and JFK, but you may not have heard of the city's first commercial airport, Floyd Bennett Field. Almost a century ago, it helped create air travel as we know it today, and it's still a place where you can take off on a journey into history. Up this way?
Yeah, right up there. You're almost there.
At the top of a building in Brooklyn, New York, a 4-story climb up takes you right to the heart of aviation's golden age.
This is the balcony where they would have positioned people with binoculars looking out for aircraft coming into the airport.
The tower looks out to where decades ago crowds flocked to witness pioneering flights by pilots we still know today. Names like Howard Hughes,
no men were ever born who have flown so far, so fast.
Amelia Earhart,
she said she could, and she did it.
And Wiley Post, who made the first solo flight round the world, starting and ending here.
Wiley Post nudges the heavily laden Winnie Mae skyward.
Anybody who was anybody in aviation in the 1930s flew out of here, men and women.
Ranger Lincoln Hollowell has overseen Floyd Bennett Field for more than 25 years, now part of the National Park Service. The former airport sits on over 1,000 acres of protected land.
This is Floyd Bennett. Ladies and gentlemen.
Named after a notable aviator, it opened in 1931, when it was one of the busiest airports in the world. The first commercial airfield in New York City. At the time, it was cutting edge.
It had something that most other airports in the world did not have, and that's long paved concrete runways.
It shows how just 28 years after the Wright brothers flew, aviation was advancing at a speed that must have shocked passengers.
They probably grew up at a time where the most common form of transportation, especially in urban areas, was a horse.
And there was one that looked
It still astonishes that mankind went from this to this to this in less than 100 years. And so much about this, the experience of modern flying, was created right here. American Airlines and TWA flew from a terminal tiny by today's standards.
What's upstairs?
Well, what was upstairs were dorm rooms.
Inside, it looks more like a train station than an airport.
Was there a template for an airline terminal in those days?
Not really. They were sort of making it up as they went along.
There were familiar things like this baggage counter, but some ideas didn't stick. Like giant turntables in the tarmac that would spin planes around to taxi for takeoff. And long before the invention of jetways, there was this.
This is our passenger loading tunnel. This would have taken passengers underneath the tarmac to the airplane, and they'd enter from the back.
Safely out of the way of spinning propellers. But its location is part of why this field failed as a commercial airport. It was too far by car from Manhattan and never got a critical contract to handle airmail for the Postal Service.
So letters were more profitable for these airlines than people were.
Yes, exactly. And it wasn't really until the DC-3 that the profit could be made carrying passengers instead of carrying mail.
The city opened LaGuardia much closer in 1939. 3 years later, during World War II, the U.S. Navy bought Floyd Bennett Field, transforming it into a vital site on the home front.
What was this place like when you first came here?
It was an active naval air station.
Bob Weiss is now 88 years old. As a 24-year-old, he served here during the Cold War, part of a flight crew flying missions aboard a plane like this, the Lockheed P-2V Neptune.
It is a big plane.
Absolutely. Carried 8 to 10 guys.
They made 12-hour round-trip journeys.
Now this is a historic view.
To spot Soviet subs out in the Atlantic.
Bob, this is a real window into history here. What was the role of the person that was sitting right here?
It was an observer station.
The aircraft now sits inside this 2-acre hangar built at Floyd Bennett Field during World War II. Many of these planes would have flown here, including an A-4 Skyhawk and a C-47 Skytrain.
but they would fit 27 troops in here.
Jim Cruikshanks is part of the historic aircraft restoration project known as HARP. The volunteers, called the Angels of HARP, earn their wings painting, patching, and bringing new life to these old planes.
What impact does that have on you to stand up close to one of these planes?
It's unreal because I've been to a lot of air museums, but they're always roped off and you can't get close. And they're all shiny, but these have like the smell, the feel, the touch, the oil's leaking out of them. These are real planes.
The restoration project launched 30 years ago with Weiss and other military veterans who had experience with the planes and could even make parts no longer in production.
Those people are long gone.
Now we're trying to teach ourselves how to do these things, trial and error. I'm trying to learn how to weld, it started off not good at all, but it's getting better.
You're learning.
Getting better. I'm learning, but we need more volunteers.
The mission now is to preserve the past for new visitors and tell the story of Floyd Bennett Field and the remarkable people who carried flight forward right here.
It's an honor to have somebody that I can sit next to who served the country like he did in a place where I can walk and see. It just makes it a little more special.
Is there something about the space?
Still smells the same inside the plane. I'll tell you, when I go in the P2V, it smells like it was yesterday.
Why does the smell make you choke up?
I just have a feeling for the place. You know, it just makes me feel good coming down here, seeing what these guys, I can't do it anymore. And I can't even crawl inside the planes. But some of these guys, you know, the work that they do and how they feel about it, it's a wonderful feeling.
Those volunteers so committed to that mission, guys. Now, because Floyd Bennett Field is within a national park, there is the possibility that it could be affected by those Doge cuts in Washington, but it's unclear at this point what, if any, actual impact there will be.
Oh my goodness.
I'm glad you're bringing light to this. This is an airport you can see if you're flying into JFK, and that man you spoke with, Lincoln, with the big beard, he's like a real
character.
He lives at the airport, you were saying?
Yeah, he lives on site. He's been a ranger for a long time. He knows this history. And what's so fascinating about this chapter in the early 30s was that back then flying was moving so fast, but you know, it was really only for a select few. It was so expensive.
Right.
In fact, a ticket, round trip tickets, 2 of them, coast to coast, cost the same as a flight, cost the same as a new car.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I'm glad you brought that to life. Great
Yes.
archival material. Thank you, Brad.
Absolutely.
Former President Joe Biden left office, but is still raising money for a presidential library in Delaware, the state that started his political career by electing him as senator 53 years ago. President Donald J. Trump has already raised millions for a library in his name. There are almost 30 presidential libraries or study centers celebrating American presidents. The latest being built will remember a president who died more than 100 years ago and, by today's standards, has a difficult legacy. Barry Peterson traveled to a small town in North Dakota to tell that story.
The Lakota Nation called this Mako Sija. The first French explorers translated that into the Badlands. A place so dangerous it can kill in an instant, yet so serene it can heal slowly. And healing is what a broken 25-year-old Teddy Roosevelt sought after his mother and wife died on the same day in the same year, hoping physical strength could rebuild inner strength.
He tested himself physically, mentally, and he proved that he could do it.
Edward O'Keefe wrote, "The Loves of Theodore Roosevelt, the women who created a president."
As he later said, it's better to wear out than rust out.
O'Keefe is also CEO of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library, now under construction. It will rise gently out of the prairie, with huge windows facing the Badlands and a grassy walking trail on the roof. The $330 million complex will open in July of 2026. Near Medora, North Dakota, population about 150. Roosevelt traveled to the Badlands from here because Medora was as far as the railroad went. When you stand in Medora, I feel like there's Roosevelt everywhere. Like there are statues, there's the Rough Riders restaurant over there and hotel. It's soaked in Teddy Roosevelt.
This is Teddy's town.
Right down to the souvenir teddy bears. But the real Roosevelt was far from warm and fuzzy. When he took office, he had a legacy of animosity towards Native Americans. He once said, "I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are the dead Indians, but I believe 9 out of every 10 are, and I shouldn't like to inquire too closely into the case of the 10th." So to tell Roosevelt's story, the library will also tell about Roosevelt's prejudice. The hardest part of this whole process is creating a Teddy Roosevelt honestly, even though in our day and age, we would call him a racist.
You approach it with transparency and honesty.
You tell the story.
You tell the whole story. I don't think that it actually diminishes TR to understand that he made mistakes. You know, he said things that are regrettable, that we wish he hadn't said, but he did.
So the library has asked Native American tribes to create their own exhibits, telling their own history.
If we tell the truth, we maybe learn from it.
Mark Fox is chairman of the Mandan, Hidatsu, and Arikara Nation. What would I learn or see from the contribution of Native Americans that would tell your truth in this library?
For example, the virgin soil epidemics that reduced our population from 50,000 combined to less than 5,000 people in a year and a half. Smallpox and other diseases that killed our people rapidly and changed our lives forever.
And it's not just a point of view, it's also the actual view.
My Lakota name is Oshkate Tawa, which means his celebration. And my Anishinaabe name, my Chippewa name is Mishtet Kiwapitin, which means many visions.
Scott Davis was executive director of the North Dakota Indian Affairs Commission. You look out the Badlands and you see river, mesas, mountains, not the way we see them.
We see them in a spiritual context. So your standard church, your synagogue, well, for us up here in the plains, it's our altar is that prairie, that rock, that butte. That's our place that we went to pray for generations.
But who owned the Badlands was never in doubt in Roosevelt's era because of manifest destiny. What does it mean? Does it mean whites will prevail?
So manifest destiny is the idea that God has ordained this American race, which is predominantly white, the dominant race, has ordained them to conquer the continent.
Dr. Larry Scogan is an historian and former president of Bismarck State College.
Those that are not part of that dominant race will either become part of that dominant culture or will disappear.
The library will deal with Roosevelt's legacy from the beginning. They're starting from scratch and saying, okay, great guy, but here are the warts.
You recognize these individuals and the great contributions they made to our society and to our country. In the past, we have not, therefore, identified the things that they did wrong. I think we're getting to a stage where we should be able to do that.
He's 5'8". I'm 5'7 3/4". My shrinking has begun.
Joe Wiegand plays Roosevelt.
Joy the Medora Campground. Bully. I'm here to do my show. Me and Teddy.
In a local historical play.
On occasion, I meet someone and they close the book on Theodore Roosevelt because of one thing he wrote or said when he was a young man.
To know Teddy, we decided Joe was the next best thing. Take me into Teddy's personality. What have you learned about him?
The glory of work and the joy of living.
What's your favorite thing about Teddy Roosevelt?
His personality is something that's been spoken of as being electric or magnetic, something that inspired others.
He was the first president who fought to conserve America's wilderness, setting aside 230 million acres of America's West, most of it forest, knowing that even in the harshest of nature, a soul can find serenity. For CBS Saturday Morning, Barry Peterson, Medora, North Dakota.
It's just beautiful out there.
It certainly is.
We have a tendency to want everybody to be good or bad, and there's nothing in between, and that is not what people are.
Well, he was complicated, seemingly at odds with himself, the first to president to invite an African American to dine with him. That was Booker T. Washington, the first to appoint a female African American as postmaster, and a number of other very prominent positions within government. I think, you know, he was a great admirer of individual achievement. And so what's so interesting is that juxtaposition. Some things he said and things he did. And then
you can't wipe it away.
Yeah.
You have to open the whole book on all of it, which is what they are trying to do.
If we can afford these materials at all, Mr. Van Buren, Sylacauga Marble ships out of Talladega County, and that might be possible if I manage to swing a few favors.
With all due respect, afford the materials. Sir, concrete is sturdy and cheap.
Concrete? It's not very attractive.
That was a scene from the new movie The Brutalist, starring Adrian Brody, released nationwide next week. It tells the story of an architect who survives the Holocaust to travel to the U.S., bringing that unique style of buildings to America. Brutalist and modern architecture in general will also be getting a close look under the Trump administration in Washington, D.C. Actually, the city has some of the highest concentrations of Brutalist buildings in the U.S., and as we discovered, some of those are the focus of a new exhibit. This is just awe-inspiring.
It's jaw-dropping
really
for all
amazing.
ages.
These columns.
Yes, largest interior printing columns in the world when they were built. I don't know how we dust it. Don't ask me.
At the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C., the city's much-maligned concrete beacons of brutalism are getting a fresh look.
People love to hate brutalism.
Eileen Fuchs is the museum's president.
They're characterized by, people call them humorless buildings, or these like monolithic, big bricks, like severe, brutal buildings, but that's not where the word comes from. Brutalism actually is kind of a derivation of a French term of béton brut, which means raw concrete.
What is that inspiration for this style?
It's a post-World War II moment when we are looking at European cities that need to be rebuilt quickly, that need that efficiency.
That efficiency also unleashed architectural possibilities.
Major developments in structural design and new methods of fabrication and construction have made concrete a material of unlimited architectural forms and shapes.
The concept of brutalism arrived in the United States in the early 1960s. It favored design over decoration. Early examples include the Marina Towers in Chicago and Rudolph Hall at Yale University.
We do not imitate, for we are a model to others.
In 1961, President John F. Kennedy convened a committee to decide on a new building style that was efficient, economical, and provided a visual testimony to the dignity, enterprise, vigor, and stability of the American government.
I was assigned to do work at this by Secretary Goldberg.
The result? The Guiding Principles for Federal Architecture, authored by future longtime Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
And we thought, well, why don't we put some strictures in there, some guidelines about what these buildings should look like.
Their first project was the Robert Weaver Building, home to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Others soon followed, including the Health and Human Services Building named for Hubert Humphrey, and perhaps most famously, the J. Edgar Hoover FBI Building. But not all brutalist creations were built above ground.
The D.C. Metro, I say subway, sorry, but the D.C. Metro is absolutely, I think of it as gorgeous.
Stunning, it's stunning, and it brings out the beauty of the architecture and the design and the symmetry and the grandiosity.
The FBI building, maybe not as much.
The FBI building, I believe, was at one point called the ugliest building in America.
And now, with buildings like these in need of repairs costing billions of dollars, the question of what to do with them is looming.
Part of what you've done here is reimagined what you could do with this.
Exactly. So you take a building like this, the Forrestal building that looked like just relentlessly monotonous, and the architects here are imagining take out a section of it. Bring in new light, bring in new use, bring in people who live here, work here, play there in a totally new way. This building is vibrant, it's different.
Yeah. I think it's more interesting to work with something that's already there and try to adapt it to new uses.
Jeannie Gang is one of the architects who participated in the Brutalist DC exhibit, including that reimagining of the Forrestal building, the Department of Energy's 1.7 million square foot headquarters.
You know, reusing buildings saves about 50 to 70% of our energy that we put into them, the embodied energy. So just for that reason alone, it's good to try to rethink these and try to reuse them.
I look at the Forrestal building and I see faceless bureaucracy.
Justin Shubo is an architecture critic. Forget reimagined, he wants the buildings gone.
You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
If they're buildings that are still in existence, even if it is a small segment of society, even if it is simply elite architects, isn't this a part of our history?
Well, I don't think the world is a museum of architecture. The world is a living, breathing place. These buildings are affecting everybody on a daily basis, and they are taking up valuable real estate.
So if the world is not a museum of architecture, if our architecture of society isn't out in the world, where is it meant to be?
No, what I mean is we should preserve good buildings.
But good by what you believe it to be, not everybody. And I do know the majority of people, there's no doubt. Brutalism was not accepted and people didn't like it, but there are architects who see a purpose in taking this recollection of the past, of this era, and having it out there.
Well, there are some buildings that are so ugly that only an architect could love it.
During President Trump's first term, Shubo helped write an executive order making classical building styles, like the U.S. Capitol, the preferred design for future government constructs. It was later revoked by President Biden, preferring to leave design choices for federal buildings up to the communities they serve.
Do you think in this next administration that the focus will be back there in trying to get a national look for federal buildings?
Well, I think that executive order was very important and highly popular with the public. It pointed out that the architecture of the American democracy is classical architecture. So this executive order wished to return federal architecture to that tradition, which essentially lasted from the founders up until World War II.
At a time where the debate on whether to preserve, adapt, or erase these buildings entirely is only likely to heat up, it falls to exhibits like this one to remind us how we got here in the first place.
We need to display and understand and interpret and embrace many different architectural styles, because especially as we look to an urban future that needs so many different ways of life and livability for people of all incomes, of all ages, you're going to need different architectural directions to address these problems.
Would we be missing something culturally if we didn't have different forms of architecture that continue over time?
Absolutely. You can see so much of American life and American fabric captured in the way the buildings have been built around us, and then the way that today and our future generations are going to reimagine them.
And it's obviously a fascinating debate. I thought also interesting, they started this style because it was so economical to do, and now it's the economics of it that are part of the problem in doing the repairs of them.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Very interesting story. I think it's the hilarious part of the story with Patrick Moynihan is the Penn Station, the new Penn Station that bears his name, is the classical art
But
tradition.
it is, again, you have all these styles that are a part of our history and the fabric of who we are and represent so many.
Yeah.
In 74, he found 40% of the skeleton of an unknown female ape-like creature. The night he found her, the camp celebration included beer and Beatles music, specifically Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. They called the skeleton Lucy.
Just over 50 years ago in Ethiopia, paleontologist Donald Johansen unearthed Lucy, an ancient human relative who lived more than 3 million years ago. Now another group of scientists have found new clues about what life was like in Lucy's time, including the surprising discovery of early tools dating back 3 million years. Brooke Silva Braga traveled to East Africa for a recent dig.
This is the Homa Peninsula in Kenya, on the edge of Lake Victoria. The East African Rift Valley is often called the cradle of humankind because so many of the oldest clues about our earliest days have been preserved under its fertile volcanic soil. That list now includes the discoveries made by Tom Plummer and his team here at a site known as Nyanga.
It's still got, after 3 million years, you can feel the edge. The edge is still sharp.
Yeah,
you could still cut with that.
Yes. These so-called flakes, basically little knives, are believed to be some of the first tools ever used on Earth.
And there are cut marks on the hippo, so we know that they were actually butchering the hippo.
Plummer, an archaeologist at the City University of New York, showed us how they were made.
All right, there's a bigger one there.
Yeah, here we go.
By hammering one stone against another.
Now what you can do, which you wouldn't be able to do before, is you cut the meat off.
The blade-like flakes.
It's a pocket knife.
And the two pounding stones.
The pounding is tenderizing the meat.
Are known as the Oldowan toolkit.
And then, of course, it's also plant food, too.
A similar, even older cutting tool was also found in Kenya, but that technology apparently died out. So Plummer believes this tool, used by our pre-human ancestors known as hominins, is what paved the way for everything that followed.
In terms of technology, I think the Oldowan technology is probably the most important technological innovation that ever happened in human history.
Now, you are a little biased, having devoted your
biased.
life to the study of this, but that's still quite a thing to say.
Yeah.
Why so important?
It allowed hominins to access a whole array of foods that they would never have had access to before. Fueling body size increase, that's fueling brain size increase. There's a feedback loop that starts, and as you get more sophisticated hominins with bigger brains, they start doing more with technology. But I think that's all starting with the older one.
The search for these early artifacts has the look and intrigue of an Indiana Jones film. Finding the splintered rocks was one thing, but locating cut marks on nearby animal bones is what confirmed that butchery, and therefore technology itself, existed here nearly 3 million years ago.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, it's a hippo bone.
It is a hippo bone.
It's a foot bone, yeah.
Oh, it's a hippo foot bone.
Right.
Blasto Onyango is basically the crew foreman. He's also a kind of local legend in the archaeological community. One of his first digs for the National Museums of Kenya helped uncover the Turkana boy, the most complete early hominin skeleton ever discovered.
It was excavated for like 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That must have been exciting. And you saw more of the body every year.
Right, yeah. Different parts of the body, the ribs, the foot bone.
Those type of miraculous finds are, of course, terribly rare. The daily work of archaeology involves searching through fine sand for small clues.
Like,
okay. Oh.
It's a tooth. So
it's a tooth. Wait,
yeah.
We just found a tooth just right now?
Yeah, and I may find more.
Paleontology researcher Rose Nyaboke Juma is especially good at finding artifacts, though we were surprised to learn that's really just part of it.
Now this one almost looks like a flake to me, but it's not, or is it?
It's a bone.
It's a bone?
Yeah.
But okay. But hold on, this can't all be. What's this?
It's a bone.
It's a bone. Everything's
Yeah.
a bone.
It's a bone.
How can they all be bones? Where are you going to put all these things?
Now the issue is we don't just pick anything. It has to have a paleontological meaning for it to be picked.
I got a bone, but we don't really care about this bone.
Yeah, we tell it, sorry, we can't pick you today.
Oh,
so it
wait,
stays.
the bones are going back?
Yep.
The bones that matter are ones like this pig's tooth. Pigs evolved so quickly their skeletons help date the surrounding area. The site is too old for carbon dating, and the ancient volcanic ash makes other dating methods so hard, the area had been mostly abandoned by researchers after artifacts from the Homa Peninsula led to inaccurate claims about human origins. Despite all that, Rick Potts, director of the Smithsonian's Human Origins Program and leader of all these efforts we're seeing, started digging here nearly 40 years ago.
So you come here in 1985, and what do you find?
Well, what we found was a place that's difficult to date.
But you didn't leave.
Well, we didn't leave.
Why didn't you leave?
Well, because science takes persistence.
The persistence has been rewarded. New technologies have made these sites easier to date, and new discoveries from across Eastern Africa have refined our understanding of our roots. The first Homo sapiens, that is, modern-looking humans, emerged in Africa about 300,000 years ago. But our hominin ancestors took much longer to become us than we had first understood, making the human-like leap of walking on 2 legs at least 6 million years ago.
And so some of the things that we thought occurred in a very short period of time within the last 1 million years are now stretched out over that 6 million year period. And that includes tool making.
And who made the tools is another surprise. Along with the flakes, Plummer's team found the tooth of a Paranthropus, an early hominin that is not our direct ancestor. That suggests the first toolmaking is not a human legacy, but an idea our ancestors copied, then used to dominate other hominins, who ultimately died out. Potts says that should be humbling.
We're the last biped standing, as I call it. All of those other ways of life became extinct, and so that gives us a lot to think about, and it draws attention to the fragility of life, even in our own journey through time.
A journey of innovation, creating new winners and losers for an incredible 3 million years. For CBS Saturday Morning, Brooke Silva Braga, Nyanga, Kenya.
Well, my takeaway from that, nutrition is key. You are what you eat. I mean, I think about the development of humankind came directly from the tool making and our ability to increase, what we brought to our diet.
And to survive. And my takeaway, science takes persistence. And it's why it's important to keep money going to science so that we can continue to understand the science of where we were and where we're going.
Brilliant takeaway, Dana. Thank you so much. Last summer's opening ceremony at the Olympic Games in Paris paid homage to the country's last queen, Marie Antoinette. Born on this day in 1755 and infamously died by guillotine during the French Revolution in 1793. Well, after years of renovation, visitors to her former home in Versailles can now get into her private life, one that's intrigued Americans for centuries. The Palace of Versailles, spectacularly grand, home to generations of Bourbon kings. Visited by millions of tourists each year.
So here we come.
Curator Bertrand Rondeau showed us Louis XIV's visionary creation.
This is the Queen's bedchamber.
Oh my, I've been here before, but without people, it is
different.
Very different.
And it's huge.
It is huge. It is ornate. And the feathers at the top, the chandeliers, every square inch of this space is filled. Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette, were the last monarchs to hold court here, under the gawking eyes of their subjects.
Anyone could come to Versailles and enter the official apartments during the day, even beggars strolling in the galleries in the apartments.
So I would imagine a queen would need to kind of get away from that.
Definitely, it was an awful life, I would say. Please.
She found refuge just behind these bedroom walls, access through secret staircases and hidden passageways. Everything is locked.
Yes.
You're afraid someone's going to come and steal something?
Maybe.
Marie Antoinette's private chambers were reopened to the world after a 5-year restoration.
That was the dining room for the Queen. A rather small room, but very comfortable, with a nice fabric on the wall.
Oh, I love it. The reopening coincided with Versailles' 400th anniversary last year. What's back there?
It's her small boudoir.
Feminine, cozy, peaceful.
It's a very, very tiny room where the Queen could rest and
there she is.
There she is, yes.
But who was this woman? Countless films have offered suggestions, from Sofia Coppola's 2006 biopic to the BBC's more recent dramatic series.
Me? I'm just the Queen of France.
Biographies like The Queen of Fashion, What Marie Antoinette Wore to the Revolution, go even further.
I think she is the ultimate heroine of a fairy tale in reverse.
Author Carolyn Weber says the Austrian-born princess was ridiculed by the French for her independence,
It's not too much, is it?
style, and excess.
French queens were not supposed to occupy the limelight. They were not supposed to be the most conspicuous. That job was for the king.
Mindful, demure.
Mindful, demure, usually very religious. She was a good Catholic, but she couldn't be the good wife and mother in the traditional sense because her husband, Louis Auguste, who became Louis XVI, didn't want to consummate their marriage or wasn't able to consummate their marriage for the first 7.5 years that she was in France.
I thought we could have a little talk about the marriage bed.
So in many ways, she developed this whole other persona as the queen of glamour, the queen of French luxury goods, the queen of fashion, because she needed an alternative form of authority and prestige that she wasn't getting by her so-called failure to have a bunch of babies the way French queens had traditionally done.
You have fulfilled our wishes and those of France.
She eventually had 3. Sired possibly, Weber says, in her private bedroom. Not at all the courtly way to do it.
Why would you attempt that in the big public bedroom where ambassadors come every morning with papers from their rulers, where courtiers are constantly going in and out? I think that privacy would have been very helpful to the couples.
For Rondeau's team of experts, and this room is?
The private drawing room of the Queen.
Consummating this curation wasn't easy either.
So here we have started to refurnish this room with the very furniture that was commissioned in 1781.
Because while these hidden rooms saved the royal family, the first time Versailles was sacked in 1789.
And Marie Antoinette and her children sneaked through the kind of private corridors that the main public couldn't see. They actually got out of Versailles safely.
The private chambers were eventually discovered and partially destroyed, along with the rest of the palace. And any remaining furniture was auctioned off.
So for more than a century now, we have been trying to get back pieces of furniture, one after the other, year after year.
What originals they couldn't track down, they substituted for pieces from that time. Some incredible detective work.
It is a detective work, I can tell you, definitely.
I mean, how do you do it?
But what we have in Paris, in the Archives Nationales, are the archives. Since there is a journal where all these pieces, when they were delivered, were inventoried with a number, and often we can find this number still on the back of a chest of drawers or seat, and so identify them.
Color, fabric, design, down to that detail?
Yes.
A palace 4 centuries old, a star in its own right, offering its most famous queen a new moment in the sun.
And the amount of detail, as he said, I mean, color, fabric, design, they wrote everything down, and that's how they're able to restore the wallpaper and the upholstery and that kind of thing. But I tell you, what was so interesting was this notion that anybody could come into Versailles
and see royalty.
And see royalty. It was during a certain time. But yes, you had that kind of access if you could make it there. And of course, Marie Antoinette, so misunderstood, and yet, you know, probably never said the term we know her best for, let them eat cake.
Sure.
But complicated, had to puff herself up with this style and excess because she couldn't have children for whatever reason.
You know what I thought was interesting was, as much as she's known for that access, that those private chambers were so intimate and cozy and relatively simple.
Yeah, very simple. I mean, in fact, after she had children, she really tapered down her whole style, like the way she dressed. Very, very simple shifts, because she liked being you know, in motion with her kids. So it was just, you know, it was really a revelation, and I really enjoyed it. And the special tour, all by myself.
That must have been a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
That was. It really was.
I also appreciated that you worked in mindful and demure into this
Mindful,
story.
very mindful.
With 17 days to go before Americans choose a new president, early in-person voting is now underway in 22 states, with even more offering mail-in ballots. More than 11 million votes have already been cast. Throughout American history, we have looked to our presidents to lead us. They all have faced challenges, with a handful making momentous decisions that defined what kind of democracy we would be. Barry Peterson takes a look at those critical turning points in our presidential history that shaped the America we live in today.
It is the never-forgotten anthem of the Civil War. But Abraham Lincoln thought his words would soon be forgotten, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
No one had any idea of the severity, the degree of casualties, the length of the conflict that was to come. It was simply unfathomable.
Susan Schulten is a professor of history at the University of Denver.
The South creates its own separate country, the Confederacy. Why didn't Lincoln just say, okay, we'll just go our separate ways?
Lincoln is reared in a country where the founders are still very live, heroes, very immediate, and he thinks of himself as very much an American to the core.
At this turning point, America's fate turns on one man's faith in one cause, the Union.
Union is what makes the identity of an American possible. In other words, union is the precondition for freedom. And without that, of course, he says, disunion, secession is anarchy.
Nearly 7 decades later, there was a new American anthem for a new American president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, elected in the midst of the Great Depression.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
But behind the scenes, another dark turning point was brewing. A campaign by top officials and journalists urging Roosevelt to make himself a dictator, arguing that such a desperate move was the only way to survive such a desperate time.
The United States was essentially curled up in the fetal position on March 4th, 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt was sworn in as president. The banks were closed, mostly. He would close the remainder a couple of days later. The official unemployment rate was 25%, but it didn't include women. If you included them, it was more like 50%.
Jonathan Alter is a journalist and historian who has interviewed 9 of the last 10 American presidents.
Why didn't he just give them what they wanted? It would have been so much easier for him and so much more power for him.
He let that cup pass because ultimately he believed in democracy. See, this is really the threshold question. Do you believe in our system or not?
Once again, America turned on the character of one man, making one decision.
Ultimately, he chose to use his great powers of persuasion, the power of his character, the power of his leadership, instead of dictatorial power.
Then came another era of American upheaval.
It was picked up and thrown back.
Sometimes violent anti-Vietnam War protests. And when President Richard Nixon was accused of obstruction of justice during Watergate, he resigned, succeeded by his vice president, Gerald Ford.
A full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon.
Ford pardoned Nixon, protecting Nixon from numerous criminal trials. Ford knew it could cost him the presidency, and it did.
My name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president.
He lost to Jimmy Carter.
There had been such distrust over Watergate and Vietnam and assassinations.
But Douglas Brinkley, professor of history at Rice University, says that their shared religious beliefs were exactly the healing America needed at exactly the moment America needed it.
This was really, in its own way, a turning point in American history then. We were jaded, we didn't believe in our presidents, there were riots on the streets, and Ford, and then after him, Carter, somehow seemed able to heal that. How?
I think both Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter both had God in their life. Gerald Ford used to have prayer sessions on Capitol Hill. They are the kind of men we'd like to believe should be president if you're looking for the idea that character matters. Those two had a character that you cannot besmirch.
Many call the January 6th insurrection a turning point in our times, an effort to overturn a presidential election. Jonathan Holloway is president of Rutgers University and an historian of African American culture, who saw a sinister message aimed at Black America.
What went through your mind when you saw the Confederate flag being waved inside the U.S. Capitol?
I understand that people declare that this is a flag that speaks about tradition, speaks about culture. Okay. But other people People who have my background in this country, African American, see that often as a flag of treason or a flag of terror, certainly a flag of threat.
Threat personally?
Personally.
Alter sees a different threat in our times. His newest book is American Reckoning, written after he attended every day of Donald Trump's felony hush money trial, which gives Alter insight when Trump insists he would not be a dictator except on day one.
We are at a significant turning point, pivot point, inflection point, however you want to describe it. And the problem is, once you put power in the hands of an autocrat, you don't get it back.
Douglas Brinkley has a more hopeful outlook.
We're going to have to look at where all of this hate speech, brutality, dehumanization is emanating from. But I never give up on the United States' ability to retake the higher ground, because we do it all the time. We've done it all the time.
Which is what the national anthem reminds us of, that the Founding Fathers believed America's fate can be trusted to we, the people. For CBS Saturday Morning, Barry Peterson, Denver.
That's a powerful message. It's incredible how Barry laid out the turning points, because it makes the point that the American democracy, it's a social experiment. It gets improved, it gets damaged, but it requires people generation after generation to get involved.
Get out and vote. I didn't know with FDR that they had wanted him to take over as in a dictatorship in that role.
Yeah.
That it was that choice to believe in democracy and the character mattering so much. Fascinating
Don't take
stuff.
it for granted.
Yeah, go and vote.
Thank you for that, Barry. Great story.